I want you to imagine you opened an ice cream shop, but the year after you opened it, it closed. It went out of business. Tell me, did your ice cream shop fail because the ice cream wasn't good or because the scaffolding outside of your ice cream shop was making it hard for people to see you? Your answer to that question might tell you a little bit more about yourself than you think it does. Welcome back. I'm Anastasia. I love art almost as much as I love Black people, so I created Black Star Reviews to highlight the work of Black artists and creatives in New York City and beyond. Today I am reviewing The Effect, which was presented by the Shed's Griffin Theater in Hudson Yards, New York City. This was my second time getting a press ticket to a show, so thank you so much to the Shed for allowing me to come and experience this performance. And y'all, they gave me great seats. I was in the third row, right in the center. So thank you again to the Shed, and let's get into The Effect. Usually, we do our dedications and our honors for other Black stars in the arts, but today's content gives us an opportunity to go in a slightly different direction, so I hope y'all will come on this journey with me. We are dedicating our episode to Percy, Lavon, Julian. And y'all, look at this handsome man, right? Isn't he good looking? I think so anyway. I mean, he's not with us anymore, and neither is his wife, so I feel like I could say that. So this water is for Dr. Julian. And let me tell you a little bit more about why we're dedicating today's episode to him. He was born in Alabama, and his parents were both graduates of Alabama State University. And I just like to point that out because I feel like all Black greatness at some point has touched even just the hem of an HBCU. And this was the case with Dr. Percy Lavon Julian. Both of his parents, who were college graduates, encouraged him to take his education very seriously, and it paid off. He went to DePaul University for undergrad, and he graduated as the valedictorian. And this is in a time when they weren't even really letting Black people into the school. So he graduated at the top of his class. From there, he went to Harvard, where he got his master's, and he would have continued to get his medical degree. But they said, well, Percy, part of the whole, advanced degree thing is you have to teach at Harvard. And you were a great student. But let's be honest, the white students are going to want to learn from you. So unfortunately, we're going to have to ask you to leave. We can't allow you to go any further at this fine institution. But Percy did not give up. He decided, okay, I still want this degree. So he crossed a whole ocean and he went to the University of Vienna to get his PhD. We are grateful to Percy for so many things. The scientific discovery that he's known for is he found a way to extract out of plants, it was actually a West African bean, and then eventually from soybean oil, he was able to take out a chemical that he could synthesize into a hormone that was safe for humans. The hormones that he was able to synthesize from plants in an efficient and cheap way were cortisone, progesterone, testosterone. And if progesterone really triggered something for you, yes, that is the one. Without Percy Lavon Julian, we may not have birth control. Or birth control would be so expensive without his efficient processes that essentially we wouldn't have birth control. So very grateful to him for that. Now, Percy was not just a boring scientist. He was not like a lab rat from what I could tell from the research I did. He had 1 year where he taught at Howard, and this was a year of scandal, big time escandalo. There was, university politics, but he fired a number of people. And in retaliation, some of the letters that he wrote to family and friends while he was in Vienna about all the fun he was having out there, those ended up getting published in a local newspaper. And it was so inappropriate that they actually had to ask him to leave Howard. That job was no more. He was only there for a year. So, I want to read these letters because they sound like some really hot tea. But on a more serious note, Percy has more than 100 patents for chemicals, and he was the first Black chemist inducted into the National Academy of Sciences. And because he, was not just a taker, he was also a giver, he helped start the Legal Defense and Educational Fund of Chicago. He was very active in science and also giving back to the community until he passed away in 1975. I am grateful to Percy for adding some personality to the science field and also allowing women the right to have a little more control over their lives. So, my body, my choice. Thank you very much to Percy, and we dedicate this episode to you. I heard about this show because the promo was, I won't say aggressive, but I will say assertive. It felt like everywhere I went, the effect at the shed. All of these blue mailers and flyers, I think they must have mailed me 3 posters for the show. I wasn't interested at first because I didn't have enough of the context, but once I looked a little bit closer at the flyer, which it looked something like this, I saw this face and I said, I know that face. This is the face of Paapa Essiedu, who was in Michaela Coel's I May Destroy You. In that show, which is on HBO, he plays this very sensitive character, a ton of vulnerability, a lot of weighty silences, a lot of eye acting, and I'm such a sucker for that. So I wanted to see him on stage. I wanted to see him in real time. And if you don't know him from I May Destroy You, you might know him from Black Mirror. But I like him in I May Destroy You. After I found out that he was in the show, I did a little more research, and I found out that it was an all-Black cast. They are Black Brits, so some of these people you may not have heard of, but it was exciting to see that it was going to be this many people all in one show. And here is the cast as pictured in the program. So, somebody I like, all Black cast, New York City. I was there. Before I even get into the summary with y'all, I want to talk about the actual experience of being in this theater. One thing I'm noticing in a lot of these newer theaters, and by a lot, I just mean The Shed and PAC NYC, is that they're experimenting with this split stage. So the stage is actually in the center of the room, and the audience is on either side. So not quite 360, but audience on this side, and the stage right down the middle. I think from a capitalism perspective, it allows the theater to sell twice as many front row seats. Instead of just having one row of people facing the stage and you can charge a lot for that row, if you have 2 front rows with equally good views, now you've made double the money. I think from a community standpoint, I actually enjoy the split stage theater because I like being able to see across the stage and watch the watchers. Like, I'm watching the show and I like watching the audience to see how they're reacting to the show so that I can kind of gauge my reaction in response to theirs. I just find it fascinating. You can't see people well, but you can see whether they're, or, you could get a sense of like some of their nonverbals. On the stage, there's only 3 props, 2 chairs, one on this side, and a bucket in the center. I won't tell you what's in the bucket, but you keep your eyes on that bucket when you go see the show. The chairs are in a watching position. They're positioned so that the people sitting in the chairs can see the people in the center of the stage. While the story takes you to a few different locations, or at least locations within the same facility, the props and the stage doesn't change. All of these transitions are communicated to us through lighting. There are lights coming from above. The floor of the stage that the actors are standing on actually lights up. So it can make shapes, it can make words. It's basically a big TV. So you could put anything underneath their feet. While it's very innovative, you do have to use your imagination a little bit with this show to think about what anything would look like outside of just the floor. So now that the staging and the lighting is out of the way, today's summary we're going to do a little bit different. It's actually a summary by the numbers because there are 4 characters, 3 stories of attraction, 2 potential endings, and 1 big twist that I did not see coming. So there are 4 characters. The first one is a patient. Her name is Connie. This role is played by Taylor Russell. Connie is a psychology student who signed up for a clinical drug trial because she is curious about the brain. Maybe, allegedly. But in terms of personality, I found her to be very pensive, cautious, and to somebody like me, who's a little more fly by the seat of your pants, annoyingly cautious. Like all of these traits to an annoying extent. The second person participating in this clinical drug trial is Tristan, and this character is played by Paapa Essiedu, and he seems to be a regular on the drug trial circuit. Seems like there's a little bit of a failure to launch type situation going on with him. It seems highly probable that he just rents himself out as a guinea pig for drug trials as his main source of income. After that, we have two scientists. The first scientist is a woman. The character's name is Dr. Lorna James, and this role is played by Michele Austin. Now, Dr. James is the scientist who's overseeing the patients. She's there with them on the day-to-day, watching them through this imaginary glass window, and she's noting their behaviors, monitoring their dosages. She's also having like kind of one-to-one conversations with them over the course of the trial to see how the medication may or may not be working. And she got this job through scientist number 2. Scientist number 2 is a man. His name is Dr. Toby Seeley. This character is played by Kobna Holdbrook-Smith. To put it briefly, he is a narcissistic, money-hungry, get it by any means necessary, very little respect for morality kind of guy. Perhaps you know someone like this, but hopefully you don't. There's 2 patients, test subjects to be more specific, and 2 scientists. You're made to feel like there are more people. It's not a control group of 2, obviously, but you don't see any other people. There are just 4 people, and they're all on stage the whole time, which is really fascinating to watch. Next, 3 stories of attraction. You have these 2 people who signed up for the clinical trial for wildly different reasons. Connie, methodical, she wants to learn something, or she's running away from something. We're not really sure at the beginning of the show. The other one, Tristan, who seems to be doing this just for kicks and giggles and also for a paycheck. And they're both testing this drug that's essentially marketed as an antidepressant. Since this is a clinical trial, they have to stay in a controlled environment. Everything is monitored, and the scientists have to control the foods that they eat, how much water they drink, how much sleep they're getting, to make sure that the drug trial is actually valid and they can use it to put the drug on the market. But the problem in this story, the problem in the drug trial is that 2 participants, I wonder who it is since there's only 2 in the show, 2 of the participants fall madly, deeply in love with each other. And it's unclear if this was destiny or if it's a side effect of this drug that they are testing on them. But potentially, it is the effect of the drug, hence the title of the show. Within that, there's 3 stories of attraction that I notice. The first is the attraction between the 2 patients. This is not a spoiler. This is in the press release for the show. You have these 2 people who fall in love in a drug trial. What could go wrong? But you also have the attraction between the 2 scientists. And it's not necessarily romantic. It's not overtly sexual. It's more of a slow burn. It's got layers, the attraction between those 2. Now, there's a third story of attraction that you actually can't see, but it comes across to me as a theme, which is the human yearning for happiness. Humans being attracted to satisfaction in their lives, wanting to feel like you can make it through a boring life, to find some sort of contentment in that, or at least a numbness so that the boringness of it and the drudgery doesn't bog you down. And these stories, these 3 stories of attraction, they weave in and out of each other throughout the show. 2 potential endings. Like in the end of Sunset Baby, when Nina is standing on the stage with the suitcase by herself and you don't know where she is or what she did, you get to write the ending for Nina based on what kind of life you think she deserves. Like, we'll never know, so you just get to fill it in yourself. This play, the effect, similarly leaves our characters hanging in the balance. I bet with 80% accuracy, I could tell you what kind of ending you would choose for the characters based on your answer to the ice cream shop question that I asked at the beginning of this episode. You could try me in the comments. Just tell me, what you thought about the ice cream shop, and then tell me what you think happens after the show ends, and I'll tell you whether or not I'm right. And I promise I won't lie. Otherwise, that would be cheating. One big twist. As the show rolled along, unrolled itself on the stage, unfurled, I found myself anticipating some of the things that the characters would do or say, And in some cases, to be honest, it was frustrating to wait for the show to catch up to the story that I was writing in my mind. However, there was a moment about 3/4 of the way into the show when my jaw dropped because the characters were at an impasse that I really, this one I did not see coming. Now, I can't tell you what it is. I can't tell you the situation that they're faced with. But if I had to describe it in vague terms, one of those things where you think it's either A or B. And then you find out that there's a choice W. So skipped over the whole alphabet between B and W. But now you have this like wild, you were never expecting it choice, and you've got to weigh it against these other choices that also aren't great. That's the most I can tell you. And if you see the show, I think you'll understand what I mean. By the numbers, The Effect has 4 characters, 3 stories of attraction, 2 potential endings, and 1 big twist. My first thoughts are, here are some of my favorite lines from the show, taken completely out of context and in no particular order. Can you please just not attack Beyonce? I want to see a wild horse and hold a gun in Mississippi. Having been to Mississippi, I have never seen a wild horse there. So that one was hilarious to me. We're all supposed to be dead now. We're designed for what? 30, 40 at most? I think people have kids now when they should die. In most cases, being aware of your own bias doesn't actually mean you can affect that bias. I woke up exhausted. I was like, what a boring dream. Then I was like, no, what a boring life. Medical science has made it so that we all live longer, but it takes no responsibility for the fact that we have to be married longer. I feel holy, like life is paying attention to me. Now, beyond the lines, thank you, notebook. My first thought is pretty surface level. It's just around mental health. What are our choices on this earth? Which choices are actually made for us, if any? How do we get happy? What would you be willing to give up for a treatment that would make you happy? Like, what side effects would you tolerate? Is love a sufficient drug for happiness, for healing, for purpose, anything? What would you be willing to give up for a drug that would make you fall in love? And do you have someone in mind to fall in love with? And would you want them to take the drug too? Or would you want them to love you for real? Would love to hear your answers. And if you tell me yours, I'll tell you mine. So speaking of love, this show explored the idea of love as a chemical reaction. High dopamine, high adrenaline. If you experience those things right next to somebody that you're attracted to, bam, love. Marriage, baby, yada, yada. Thinking a lot about the chemical reaction of love, which meant I had Tina Turner just playing in my head during the show. 2 songs. The first is Typical Male, and the lyrics for this one: all I want is a little reaction, just enough that will tip the scales. I'm just using my female attraction on a typical male. Second song, y'all probably saw this one coming. What's love got to do with it? I'll read it to you. You must understand, though the touch of your hand makes my pulse react, that it's only the thrill of boy meeting girl opposites attract. It's physical, only logical. You must try to ignore that it means more than that. Oh, oh, oh. What's love got to do with it? Got to do with it. What's love but a secondhand emotion? What's love got to do with it? Got to do with it. Who needs a heart when a heart can be broken? I think Miss Tina would have loved this show. May she rest in peace. The Tina Turner songs and this show took a fairly heteronormative approach to love and attraction. The characters in this performance, in this show, didn't get a chance to explore if this attraction that they were feeling as a potential side effect was wide-reaching. Like, did they have the hots for anybody in sight? Did it matter that person's like gender, sexuality, or preferences? Or was there some reason why they fell in love with each other versus any of the other test subjects? Because we're assuming that they're in a group even though we can't see these other people. Because of their choice on each other and this like instant magnetism, There's an emphasis on the primal aspects of attraction. There's a moment where Connie is explaining to Tristan that men like when women laugh because it implies submission. I loved this moment because I learned something new. So she explains that when you are laughing your beautiful girl laugh, ah ha 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 ha, you tilt your head back, right? And you're revealing your neck, which you need to live. So when you tilt your head back, this is the most vulnerable position you can be in. And so when you are laughing at a joke that a man is telling, whether it's funny or not funny, you are showing him vulnerability. So I'm scared because I laugh a lot. And I'm not trying to submit to everybody whose jokes I laugh at. And it made me think more about vulnerability and how it actually works in real life. The question that I'm thinking of is, what is more of a hold? Telling someone a secret or keeping a secret someone's told you? Do I feel more closely tied to the people who I've told my secrets to? Or do I feel more closely tied to the people whose secrets I'm helping them keep? And I haven't figured out my answer for that yet, but I would be curious for you to think about that and see where you land. But vulnerability aside, trust aside, there were some very cute moments of the sweetness of love, the playfulness, like when you just get together with someone and you're so silly and you just can like roll around and tell jokes and look into each other's eyes. And that feels like the only thing that's happening in the world, that like beautiful, immediate euphoria of sharing love with someone and feeling like it's returned. And I'm thinking, what if we could just be silly all the time? Like, if we could be silly all the time, would we feel the same need for partnership? We're presented with the idea that the way to happiness is to find a partner, have kids, settle down. But if we were presented with more than one main route to happiness, would we still put so much energy into coupling up, into dating, into, would we be as sad over these breakups? And I'm asking for a friend. No, I'm kidding. I'm asking as a woman who, to borrow from appropriate, is somewhere between sweet girl and bitter woman. I have questions around that. And I have deeper questions that I think came up in the show. Which part of love is real? And what is the equivalent of a placebo effect in love? Is it like, oh, we had shared hobbies and I thought it was love, but it wasn't. We had a meet cute, so I thought it was love, but it wasn't. My parents love him, so I thought it was love, but it wasn't. What's the placebo effect in love? What's the role of socialization when we work towards love? How much of our motivation is actually the result of society pushing us along in this stream? And in any given relationship, who's more likely to be in love with whom? I don't have the answers. My final thought is around race. I've always loved Law and Order. Ever since I was a little kid. I probably was watching it too young. I probably was watching it when I shouldn't have been watching it. I've watched Law and Order my whole life until it got tough to watch because I couldn't reconcile my interest in Law and Order with the police brutality that was happening in real life. The cops I saw on TV were people I respected, in some cases had crushes on, and I thought, they were real heroes. But then what I would see in real life, I was like, this is not, something here is not adding up. So I had to take a break. But I missed the idea of a thriller. I missed a crime show. I missed a procedural drama that at the beginning you're going to tell me the problem. And by the end of this 48 minutes, it's going to be solved. It's going to be finished. Nice and neat, right? I actually found a niche on Netflix by watching crime shows from other countries, but specifically the European and UK ones. So I love anything by Harlan Coben. To give you an example. One thing I noticed when I was watching all of these European and most often UK crime detective shows was I noticed that the casts were diverse, but racial identity was not a part of the story or the plot for these journeys. The perpetrator wasn't always black. Black people weren't always poor. Some of the kids were black or white or biracial, and it just wasn't a thing. It never came up. It felt like a person of any race could play any role. This made it basically a comfort watch for me because while I was watching this television show, I could suspend the reality that we live, work, play, eat, sleep in a racist society. And this was the criticism of shows like Sex and the City and Friends. All of the characters were white, And when people pointed this out, the thinking was, well, we can't add Black characters because then the show would be about race. But really, we didn't want Sex and the City to become a dialogue on race. We didn't want Friends to get to the bottom of colorism. We just wanted there to be one set of Black hands helping get that couch up the stairs. We just wanted for there to be one Black girl at lunch telling Miranda to get over herself. Because Miranda is, in my opinion, the worst character on that show. So you had, instead of shows where everyone could be together, you had Black shows and you had white shows. And the white shows didn't explore race at all. They just stuck to entertainment. But Black shows, as Black people often have to do, did both. So I'm talking about shows like Living Single, Girlfriends, Martin. They all were entertaining and they explored race. And the reason why I stand on this is because if you were to replace one of the characters on these shows with a white person, like pull a mid-show swap out, like Aunt Viv on Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, the show would quickly stop making sense. If you took Tracee Ellis Ross as Joan out of Girlfriends and replaced her with a white woman, it would not make sense because race was a deep part of the show just by virtue of the characters being played by Black people. In this production of The Effect, which differs from the original production, you have an all-Black cast acting out what presents itself as a race-neutral story. And it just made me feel so confused, like as a watcher. Now, the writer and the actors, they're all from the UK. So maybe they would tell me I'm just a race-obsessed American, and I'll take that. But the play was performed in America. So I'm going to continue my point. There were 2 lines in the show that mentioned race, but they were so minor and they were so far into the show that I don't feel it was sufficient to address the big Black elephant in the room. The first mention was when the man scientist talks about his father being a physician from Nigeria and not having respect for him as a psychiatrist, seeing it as like a softer, less rigorous, less intellectual science. But he was just like, yeah, my dad was from Nigeria. He didn't support me. End of conversation. The second moment was when the woman scientist says, I'm a working class Black woman. Getting out of bed is an effing political act. And the fact that working class was thrown in there ahead of Black is exactly what I'm talking about. Whether you are a wealthy Black woman, a middle-income Black woman, or a Black woman who's being actively pursued by poverty, getting out of bed and showing up every day as your Black self in this world is a political act. We saw that with Michelle Obama when her husband ran for president. She is an Ivy League educated lawyer, but her accolades don't protect her from her existence being politicized. And you can throw Meghan Markle into that category too. We also see it with Beyonce. On her world tour, people are arguing with her. The Beyonce, Knowles Carter, arguing with her about lights and lenses and whether the ones she wants even exist. Her fame, her wealth, her cultural capital, none of that matters. Her existence is politicized because she is Black. And you can throw Taraji P. Henson into that. So what I'm saying is I'm all for diverse casting, but set the table. If you're having someone over for dinner who is a vegetarian, take a close look at the menu. If you're going to stack this show with Black people, take a close look at the story. And if you don't want to change the story because you want to stay true to the text, and I respect that, especially if you're the writer, then let's see an ethnically diverse cast. Let's get somebody of every single race. That's race neutral, and that's how you create race neutrality. But if you want a Black cast, if you've set your heart on it, then I encourage you to consider an adaptation. Now, this is not unheard of. I didn't invent this. When Denzel Washington performed in The Iceman Cometh, they made some tweaks. When Wendell Pierce performed in Death of a Salesman, there were some tweaks. When Nicole Ari Parker and Blair Underwood performed in Streetcar Named Desire, they made some tweaks. So when you change the cast from the original writing, or you create a cast that was not what you had originally considered, it's time to make some tweaks. If you were to ask me what would I tweak, I can't give you them all for free, but I'll give you one. I find it hard to believe that 2 Black scientists working together on a potentially lucrative drug trial would not ever at any point talk to each other about the barriers they were breaking by doing this together, or the obstacles they'd faced in getting to that point in their careers. Percy Lavon Julian, Dr. Percy Lavon Julian, a real Black scientist, could not have told you the story of his career without mentioning the impact of race. And times have really not changed that much since his heyday, unfortunately. So just to give one more example of adaptation from television and from my personal life, here's an example of all-white adaptation so that we can take race out of it if that is important. The sitcom The Office. It was a hit at first in the UK, and studios felt like it had the potential to be a hit in the US as well, but they adapted it for American audiences before they introduced it. The original show, as it was aired across the pond, is unlikely to have had the same success that the Steve Carell American version had. And if you don't believe me, you should watch one of the British episodes and watch one of the American episodes and see which one you like more, and then also tell me where you're from. They studied what would land with American audiences, and they tweaked it so that American audiences would find it relatable and the show would go on to be the huge success that it came. Here's a personal example. I went to the most breathtaking spa when I was in Roatan, Honduras. This was my New Year's Eve trip and gift to myself. So I looked so forward to this spa appointment the whole time I was on the trip because it was the last little thing I was going to do before I returned to the hustle and the bustle and the grind of New York City. It was a full body and scalp scrub, a massage, and a facial. And the service was amazing. It was everything I needed. Really can't recommend the treatment enough. But since I had taken my hair down for the scalp scrub and, it got all wet, I had gone back into the changing room to try to put it back up. And I'm looking around in the changing room, trying to find something I can use to comb my hair, and all they have is those little tiny baby combs. The combs they used to have on picture day. What am I going to do with that? Comb one hair at a time? So I exit the changing room, I go to the front desk, and I'm like, hey, do you have any other combs besides these? And they said no. Like a Black girl who worked there offered to give me her comb, her own personal comb that she had in her bag that she let me borrow because she understood what I was up against. There was no consideration for hair types other than type 1, stick straight, when they decided how to stock the bathroom. And while I enjoyed the rest of my time, and like I told y'all, the service was excellent, I felt after that keenly aware that they did not expect people like me to be there. And so they didn't anticipate or prepare for my unique experience. Now, the play originally was written by Lucy Prebble, and she's on the team that created the show Succession, which is on HBO. If you've watched Succession, that show also doesn't demonstrate much cultural competency related to the Black experience. And there have been some team interviews for the people behind Succession to address this. But as the show said, being aware of your bias doesn't actually mean that you can affect that bias. And this show gave the audience an unusable comb. It was a story that could work, but ultimately left me feeling a little bit tangled. Overall, I am awarding the play The Effect 2 Black stars. That's because there was something unsettling for me about the way Black bodies were at work in this show for everyone to watch, even the people, the scientists, but there was no exploration of them as whole people. Maybe that was the point, but even the scientists didn't get an opportunity to fully develop an identity in this show. Now, because the cast was talented, the performances were impeccable, considering the material that they were given. Kobna Holdbrook-Smith was especially unsettling. That man can play a bad guy. There is something in his voice, it's quite gravelly. I found him honestly captivating. Would love to see more of his work. Who would I take to go see this show? This could be triggering for anyone who has depression or anxiety. Just keep that in mind as you're figuring out who you would invite. So I would bring people who crave structure, anyone who reminds you of Connie. I would bring people who love flexibility, so anyone who reminds you of Tristan. I would go to see this show on a double date especially if I wanted to have an interesting and possibly tense conversation afterwards. So just keep that in mind if you ever go on a double date with me. I would take people who are divorced or are considering divorce or who are getting ready to get back out there. People who like British humor, British shows, people who liked Michaela Cole's show, people who liked Succession. So it's a pretty wide range of people that you could take who I think would enjoy this. Where to go after the show. The Shed is right in the center of Hudson Yards, so you're right next to the Vessel, you're right next to the shopping center, you're right next to the river, also next to the High Line. You really couldn't be in a better location. And there are 43 bars and restaurants in Hudson Yards, which is so cool. I grabbed my phone, started scrolling through to see, let's figure out which one is Black owned, which one has and a Black executive chef. I looked up every single one. What do you think the number is? Black owned or Black executive chef? Are you thinking 3? It's not 3. It's 0. It's 0, y'all. Nothing in Hudson Yards is owned or directed by Black people, as far as I can tell. The best you're going to be able to do in terms of supporting a person of color if you're trying to eat in the Hudson Yards area is to go to Fuku by David Chang. And the upside is they have fried chicken. The show is up until March 31st, so don't wait. I was there during previews, like I told y'all. It was a packed house, so I really would not drag my feet. If there's something you heard in this review that you're like, I gotta go see that for myself, go do it now. Don't wait. Thank you again to The Shed. This was only my second time attending a performance as press, so I really appreciate your belief in the vision of Black Star Reviews. It means the world to me. I hope to return to The Shed to see something else you all are working on. For everybody watching at home, please be sure to follow me on TikTok. You can see behind the scenes footage, some mini reviews, and plenty of other fun stuff on my TikTok page. You can also follow me on Instagram for pictures of my Black art escapades in New York City. And that would be a great place to let me know through a comment what you thought about this episode or even what you thought about the play, should you have the time to go see it yourself. Don't forget to like and subscribe to this channel so you're the first to know when I post a new episode. And in the meantime, I love y'all deep. Black love and starlight. Keep shining.